Welcome back to another official Narrative Assassin update video with your host, yours truly, Hussein Hill. Great to be back with you guys once again. It's been 2 months since my last update video. I do apologize for the hiatus. I've been extremely busy. But hopefully, this video is marking, or will mark rather, the return to form with trying to get one video out every week. No promises. Like I said, I've been very busy and in a good way, very productive, very busy with a lot of different things happening professionally in IRL rather, IRL professional work, contracts, things of that nature. So it's been very busy, very productive. I'm trying to get back into the routine of doing at least one video a week here on YouTube and on Rumble. And another reason why I didn't make a video is because, quite frankly, there really hasn't been anything in particular that I felt was worthy of a standalone video. There hasn't been a particular story or a particular bit of current events that, isolated in of itself was worthy of a long form video or an update video. Basically to say that we've had something of a content drought. There's been a content drought out here. I see a lot of people kind of trying to make videos and cover a lot of these certain isolated stories, but it's not interesting. In my humble opinion, a lot of the stories are not worth a standalone video. And because this video channel is not I don't release videos every single day, I can't justify covering like the standalone story. So for reasons to do with work and IRL professional endeavors, as well as just not knowing what the fuck to talk about, I haven't made a video in a while. But again, I'm trying to return back to the usual routine that I had a few months back of releasing one video every week here on YouTube and Rumble. And of course, guys, in the wake of me not having videos here on the channel, always make sure to go check out my Twitter. I give updates on my Twitter/X about the weekly Twitter spaces, the Narrative Assassin official spaces, which are usually done Wednesday and Friday, but we've been a bit liberal with the rescheduling because life's life, right? Life is life. So with that said, guys, we are going to talk about something, a broad brush conversation today in this video. And the broad brush conversation is going to be discussing the political trajectory and what to look forward to as we approach the 2028 elections, the general elections, and sort of like a broad brush analysis of what we're facing here politically in this country. We're going to cover all the things as it pertains to what the Democrat Party is looking like, what they are turning into, what they seek to do going forward, and what the Republican Party is looking like, what it is, I will not say turning into per se, but how it's adapting or lack thereof in the face of this new terrain of politics, and how this will absolutely the the way to which the parties will interact with one another and the way to which these parties will attempt to adapt to this new political terrain will absolutely color, it will absolutely determine the outcome of the election in 2028. And we hear a lot about this, especially those like myself who work in politics professionally. We always hear this term, most important election of your lifetime. And to be frank, in terms of just like a sort of like sobering, objective analysis of the players involved in this upcoming election, it's really unimpressive. Right? There's on both the Republican and Democrat side, they're not putting up anyone that is significant, that is paradigm shifting. It's kind of business as usual. You have the usual sort of neocon types, and there's more complexity that we'll get in a few minutes, or as we progress through the show. The sort of establishmentarian types with the GOP. No one really impressive, no one really compelling. And then with the Democrats, it's basically a new evolution of the same radical leftism that we're used to in the political discourse. So on the ground, it's really not that impressive. It's really not that paradigm shifting per se, or rather, it's really not that extraordinary. It's really not that noteworthy. But in terms of what this will represent, the symbolic results or consequences of this election are in fact paradigm shifting and are in fact consequential. So we will be getting into that in particular. Before we do that, let me make sure to plug in all the usual platforms. Please, guys, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you're following me on Rumble and YouTube. Make sure you're following me on X. Make sure you're following the Federalist Press on X. We're actually working on, I'm not going to give an actual hard date of release, but we were actually working on a TFP, the Federalist Press website. It's been a long time since we've had that, since I acquired it from its former owner. It took us a long time to get back to that point, but now we are in the works of working on and releasing a TFP official website. So make sure to look out for that. Also, guys, make sure to follow me at Old North Patriots, which is also on X. Right now, there is no Old North Patriots website, but we are crafting some public and internal documentations and parameters for the organization. So we're building out that as well too. So a lot of great stuff. A lot of great stuff is happening. I've been very, very busy with trying to build out all these different platforms and these different brands and organizations and all these sorts of things. So extremely busy. So make sure to follow me on all those platforms. And as always, guys, if you feel so inclined, please go in the description below of the video and feel free to donate to either buy me a coffee / Hussein Hill for month-to-month followership, no minimum or maximum donations required, or for standalone donations, consider going to Cash App at NAH Hill at 86 on Cash App. Trying to think of anything else in particular. Nothing really else besides that. Um, redoubling down, or we'll say moving to the next level with trying to do some musical and artistic endeavors with organizing and promoting musicians. We're kind of taking that slow because I have a lot on my plate, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, with plugging all the relevant relevant platforms and IPs and organizations. So we have a lot on our plate. I have a lot on my plate. So with regards to the music endeavors, I really want to sink my teeth into that. And I definitely want to try to do another video coming up soon about art and culture. I haven't done one of those in a while, and I think it's definitely time. We're definitely past due for one of those. So look out for that as well. And of course, make sure to always try to catch the NA official X Spaces on X, usually Wednesday and Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern every single week. So that's all the plugging and the shilling out of the way. Let's get into the subject matter of this Narrative Assassin update video. So, as I said earlier, top of the show here, we're going to do a broad brush, bird's eye view sort of analysis of the political terrain and the trajectory to which both the DNC and the RNC are heading, and how this is affecting the electorate, and really how this affects our country. And again, as I said earlier, there's so many things have happened, but I feel like the individual stories or events that have occurred since the last time I've done an update video really aren't significant on their own. Rather, they're more indicative of a large scale reality of where this country is heading. And I think we're going to start with the Democrats first. We're going to start with the DNC, and we're going to kind of analyze the radical left. And we'll start with this as well because I've talked about this before, I believe, yes, actually, in my last update video, and I've sort of sprinkled this throughout my update videos in general, and I've definitely talked about this a lot on the NA official X Spaces, that ever since October 7th in particular, the dissident right, or the Israel critical right, has began to, or lurched into, or fully embraced this sort of dismissal, or this sort of like playing down of the threat of the radical left. There has been a very pronounced move for many on the so-called Israel critical right wing or dissident right wing writ large to not engage with the fact that the Democrat Party is still radical, that the Democrat Party is becoming more radical, and more specifically, more importantly, that the Democrat Party is evolving and adapting to the new dialectics of the conversation. So, for example, a few years ago, we can say specifically from 2016 to 2020, roughly speaking, you could say yeah, we'll say 2016 to 2020. I think is a good sort of like range to track this. The early iteration of the post-Trump radical left was it was very um, erratic. It was very erratic. It was very disorganized. And what really fueled it really was just an anger against Trump, an anger against the broad brush right, and sort of the revanchist nationalist impulse of which Trump represented in 2016. And so within that milieu of radical left wing dialectics and coalitions and organizers and figures, there was this attempt to play into the wokeism, right? The hyper advocacy for LGBTQ, the hyper advocacy for non-whites or minority groups, the shaming of white people, the complete cudgeling and destruction, at least rhetorically speaking, in some cases. Actually, no, rhetorically and physically, when you have the reality of the destruction of national monuments, Confederate monuments, that were of the presidents of the United States. These national monuments, there was a rhetorical and a physical destruction of all things relating to Americana, all things relating to American heritage, lineage, pride, excellence, so on and so forth. This is what colored the left in the wake of the initial Trump victory in 2016, and it was very distasteful. And everyone in the electorate, everyone across the country, for the most part, was turned off by the hyper wokeism, by the videos of transsexuals, freaking out in public, threatening to attack people for not using their correct pronouns. You saw the Summer of Love in 2020, right? With the complete destruction of almost the entire country in the wake of the George Floyd debacle, the wake of the George Floyd death. There was murder, there was looting, there was even in those Chaz zones, I forget the name, but those Antifa sanctioned zones, CHOP, I believe it was called, or Chaz, I forget. Correct me in the replies below. In those Antifa relegated zones during that time, there was rape, there was sexual assault, there was murder, there was blackmail, all these sorts of things. And this sort of colored the public vision of Antifa and the radical left. What the radical left did up until very recently, and we'll get into that really up until October 7th specifically, but even before that, um, they created, because of their histrionics, because of their ire towards the right wing and towards Trump, they created this image in the American population of unhinged, unreasonable, anti-free speech, liberal fascists or left-wing fascists, left-wing totalitarians. And this would explain from 2016 all the way till, arguably speaking, even 2024 for that matter, but less so much 2024, more 2016 till 2020, we'll say again. This would explain a massive shift in the electorate from disenfranchised liberals, different disenfranchised leftists, people leaving the DNC in notable droves, in notable numbers, to either become libertarians, independent, or a Republicans, but broadly speaking, kind of like latching on in some way or another with the Trump movement, with the MAGA movement. Enter October 7th. October 7th changes the game entirely. And we've talked about this at length on the channel and as well on my NAX spaces as well. October 7th fundamentally changed the conversation in this country. No longer was criticizing Israel taboo. No longer was criticizing Zionism taboo. No longer was having a, we'll say, bipartisan or nonpartisan conversation about foreign entanglement via the state of Israel off the table for discourse. As a matter of fact, post October 7th, criticisms of Israel have skyrocketed. It is ubiquitous in this country now amongst the electorate and amongst the mainstream culture to be critical of Israel. And that is just the case. And we'll get into this in a few minutes when we go to analyze the RNC. The Zionist Republicans and the Zionist right wing Jews have taken note of this. And many of them, will say a large portion of them or a notable portion of them, are reacting histrionically, panicking, aggressively trying to shut down all speech that is related to the criticism of Israel, trying to label everyone anti Semitic, and trying to basically push this narrative that anyone that is criticizing Israel is a woke rightist or a woke leftist, an anti-American, what's it called, horseshoe theory, sort of like neo-Nazi, Islamicist, anti-American foreign shill or something, some amalgam in there, some amalgam therein of those things. In the wake of that, as I said earlier at the top of the show as well, or earlier in the show as well, not only has the dissident right in particular leaned into the conversation of criticism of Israel, so has the left. As a matter of fact, the left has almost entirely made their platform about the criticism of Israel. I mean, we saw this directly after October 7th. We saw Antifa and various left wing groups go to the streets peacefully, I might add. The first initial wave of the October 7th protests were peaceful. They just were. I know a lot of Zionists don't want to admit that. A lot of Republicans don't want to admit that, but they were just by and large peaceful. They flooded the streets peacefully, more or less, to protest the genocide in Gaza. to protest the infiltration of Zionism in the Republican Party, and to just protest the overarching like we'll say colonialist expansionism of the state of Israel and their collaborators here in American right wing politics. As we've gone down this timeline, the Democrat Party has not relinquished on that. The Democrat Party now is successfully, or rather has successfully, assimilated anti-Zionism into their platform. And we even start to see another thing as well too that they've also started to do, which is not just incorporate anti-Zionism, but anti-corporatism, anti-cronyism. They're now evolving to a stage where they are no longer just talking about the identitarian issues. The identitarian issues still exist. They are still pro LGBTQ. They are still pro feminist. They are still pro, by and large, non white or minority advocacy based. All those things persist. However, they are now leaning into a broader conversation of class warfare, cronyism, corruption, and whether people want to admit or not, the Trump administration has plenty of it going on. They are giving the left all the material they need for the perfect 2028 slate of pitches of why you should never vote Republican ever going forward. With the rampant corruption happening in the administration, insider trading, preferred jobs, the literal rug pull that Trump himself orchestrated with the Trump coin, as well as the cover up things like the Epstein files, which was a massive cover up of one of the largest international espionage and international intelligence gathering and intelligence dissemination between various assets in the modern age, with with the main asset being a left-wing Jewish fixer who works on behalf of the interest of nonpartisan Jewry. While he did have a loyalty to the left-wing Jews of Israel, by and large he was a Jewish chauvinist and supported Jews writ large as just a ethnic Jew. So all these things and much more the Trump administration is engaging in. And the left wing, the Democrats, the DNC, are extremely hip to this, and they are exploiting the reality of this. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, much of the dissident right, and we have these people, we know the names: Jake Shields, Dan Bilzerian, even Stu Peters, um, Candace Owens to a lesser degree, but still pronounced. Tucker Carlson, very pronounced. You have even smaller figures like Doomernet, that race trading sellout of a Catholic, that race trading Catholic guy, right? But all these different clowns. Oh, Sneeko, of course, he was once a part of the dissident right. Now he's a full-blown caliphate Islamicist now. Many voices from the dissident right basically are now leaning into this conversation that the number one issue is Israel, and that is it. It is just Israel, it is just Zionism, it is just, and different elements of the so-called dissident right and or the Israel critical right are they're gauging on how far they want to go into the conversation of Jewry in and of itself. Some are saying it's Zionism, some are saying that it's a state of Israel and Zionism. Some of them are saying that it's a state of Israel and Zionism and Jews to a certain degree. Some, Jews in general. But that's it. The furthest it goes with these people is that it's Israel and or Zionism and or Israel and Zionism and or Israel and possibly Jews, depending on who you're listening to. They have completely dismissed all these individuals have completely dismissed the very blatant and obvious threat of the left, of the Democratic Party, of the cultural left. And meanwhile, the cultural left, the DNC in particular, has not forgotten what they're about. They have not forgotten their modus operandi. As a matter of fact, we've seen a slew of primary victories by the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, an organization not even, we'll say, roughly speaking, 5, 6, 7 years ago, was wholly considered radical, even within the ranks of the DNC. Yes, the DNC played footsie with these actors for years. Yes, these were people that were used specifically for rallies, for large scale demonstrations. But up until very recently, really up until now, up until this year in particular, but specifically after October 7th, the DSA and these radical left wingers were never considered to be viable candidates. They were always the shock troops of the DNC. They were always used for grassroots or street level activism, outreach, and yes, terrorism, basically domestic terrorism. Now, the DSA has political legs. We see it with Zohran Mandani. We see it with that other Syed, I forgot his full name. We covered it on TFP. Syed, that other Muslim individual. We see it with a slew of other Democratic Socialists of America acolytes and associates winning sweeping victories in the primaries, gearing up for the midterms and into the generals. And this is disturbing because these people, again, and I've talked about this before, even in earlier narrative assassin videos that are now lost to time because they were deleted off of YouTube when I first got banned off of YouTube initially, the Democrat Party and the cultural left has never stopped believing the same things it's believed for years. They have always, for the most part, and specifically, if you want to have a particular uh, um, era, specifically post Cold War, the post Cold War left in particular, because people can go into the conversation, and it is true, the state of Israel was founded by socialist, secular Jews, left wing Jews, ostensibly, or nominally speaking, rather, nominally speaking left wing Jews. That's true. That's a fact. That's a historical reality. But specifically after the Cold War and onward, the cultural American left has stuck out a position with regards to Israel, viewing Israel as an extension of European colonialism, viewing Israel as a new revivalist national socialist Nazi state, and that the Jews that occupy or reside in Israel are in fact European settlers, European colonizers, European tyrannical fascists, theocrats or racialists, and they work in tandem with the evangelical Zionist Christian right wing, or the broadly speaking white Christian Judeo-Christian right wing here in America. That has been the narrative for the left for quite some time, and they haven't changed up. They have not changed up. However, many of these new arrivals, or people who are just historically ignorant to the conversation of the historicity of Zionism, Israel, the modern left, the old left, the modern left, and how that relates to the modern right, they do not understand any of these things. They truly believe that because of October 7th, because of the explosion of the liberalizing of the conversation about Israel, that all of a sudden the left wingers just woke up one day and said, you know what, we're done. We're done hating white people. We're done hating Christianity. We're done supporting homosexuality. We're done supporting anti-whiteism or white genocide. We're done with all those things because we now agree that the hyper-capitalist crony, Zionist, corporatists, whatever populist nonsense that people like Tucker Carlson want to cook up, Fed Carlson wants to cook up for the audience. We now agree that the Zionist corporatist capitalists are the real ones in control, and race and identity and sexuality and nativism or the lack thereof is no longer important. Could not be further from the truth. So when we look at the DNC of the modern age, and we look at the trajectory that the DNC is heading with regards to 2028, it's very simple. The DNC is currently refurbishing itself, evolving itself, if you will, developing itself to a place where now it acknowledges class warfare, cronyism, crony capitalism, anti-Zionism, anti-inter we'll say it will posture as being anti-internationalist while being extremely internationalist. Maybe anti-internationalist as it pertains to Israel, but now it pertains to, I don't know, the Islamic sympathies or mass migration from the third world or mass migration in general from any non-white country therein. It will not relinquish its narrative or their narrative, or rather, the left will not relinquish its hatred for Christianity, for the idea of being against traditional Western Christian and or Catholic uh, um, um, patriarchal narratives. As a matter of fact, it's going to take all those things. So it is raveling up sort of this you can call Occupy Wall Street 2.0 sort of narrative against the 1%, the working class rise up, and they're shoehorning or they're backdooring rather all the identitarian conversations, all that's still on the menu. And you can see it right now. I recently on X posted a clip from Abolition Rising, I believe that was the organization, and you have a left winger harassing a Christian street protester who's just holding him aside very peacefully, explaining the reality of abortion, harassing him, threatening him, you know, being diminutive with his speech, or domineering with his speech, rather emasculating him, essentially trying to goat this guy into a physical altercation because this guy is against abortion. And I guarantee that same left winger in that video probably hates Israel too. Probably hates Bibi Netanyahu as well. And also, too, while there is a the anti-whiteism of the left still persists, there is a new refurbishing with this. You see with people like figures like Shane Gillis. You see it with some of the people that they're propping up for elections. Amy Acton, for example. Now, people say Amy Acton's a Jew. As I did the research, I'm pretty sure she's married to a Jew. I don't think she's actually Jewish, but nevertheless, she presents as white, regardless if she's Jewish or not. And you see a lot of these other actors that they're propping up now who they relate like aesthetically and existentially, if you will, with white people. They look white. They're from white middle America. They're white middle class, working class individuals. They're propping these people up now. Now they're sort of being like, hey, listen, we do believe in white supremacy as a threat to America. We do believe in systemic racism, but hey, listen, we're not here to hate people. Like, we don't hate white people. We just want them to be accountable, right? That's the argument now. We don't hate white people. We just want them to be accountable for their sins. And we want to use the state to physically and financially punish them for their previous sins or their alleged or perceived sins. This is the left of the modern age. And so again, as I said before earlier, with the dissident right wing, this is a massive issue. And what's adorable about that unfortunate reality about where the dissident right wing is heading is that people, one person in particular, Nicholas J. Fuentes, among many others, Joel Weapon, there's many others, people that I respect, James Fishback, for example, but many people who are saying, hey guys, listen, Israel is an issue, Zionism is an issue. We totally agree with that. But the left is still the left. The left still hates us. They still want to murder us. Let us not forget what happened to Charlie Kirk. And there's a huge debate happening online again about the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I do believe Andrew Wilson and Candace Owens are poised to do a video about this week. This video might be released, most likely will be released on Friday, tomorrow. So to be happening tomorrow, but nevertheless are poised to do a debate about this Friday of this week. And again, you can sit there and quibble. I think the evidence is overwhelmingly contrary to the assertion that Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel. But nevertheless, you can have your theories and your beliefs, what have you. We can just look at who celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It wasn't neo Nazis. It wasn't Zionists, Jews. It was the left. It was the radical left who took to social media and overwhelmingly celebrated and scoffed, and to this day still celebrates and makes fun of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a moderate Zionist, essentially socially liberal, or at the very least socially libertarian with some right-leaning positions American citizen. But to the dissident right, to the Israel critical right, to the low IQ anti-Semitic right wing, that makes no difference. That is of no consequence because right now they can think about is Israel and the Jews in Israel. And we'll get into that in a few minutes about how that's very important. We shouldn't stop talking about the Jews in Israel. There is a reality to the Jews in Israel, and we're going to get into that conversation in a few minutes as we address the RNC and as it pertains to this conversation. We cannot forget, and we should never forget, the fact that the left is still the left. The left wants to kill us. Again, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, two justified shoots of two radical Antifa citizens or terrorists or activists or whatever who tried to obstruct lawful federal operations that were dispatched to investigate and neutralize mass fraud by Somalian illegal immigrants. And Alex Preddy and Renee Good tried to obstruct that. They tried to stop federal agents, law enforcement, from cracking down on people who don't belong in this country, stealing from American citizens who were born in this country. Native Americans, intergenerational, real Americans. And they were shot because they were obstructing these operations. And again, the radical left mourns them. The radical left has tried to martyr them. And again, you look at even the people that are on the left that are trying to play nice with some elements of the Israel critical right, Max Blumenthal, Glenn Greenwald, all these actors, to what is mentioned, one being a gay Jew leftist, and one just being a run-of-the-mill Jewish leftist. they're still talking about the tyranny of nationalism, the tyranny of white supremacy, the tyranny of the American empire, and all these sorts of things. These people are not here to back up America. They're not America first. They're not even meaningfully patriotic. They don't even like this country. But again, because the Israel critical right is so fucking brain rotted and so ignorant of the conversation, and many of these people, if not the vast majority of these people, just got hip to this stuff literally after October 7th. Some of them were legacy media spooks like Tucker Carlson, or grifters like Candace Owens, or just scammers like Dan Bilzerian, aka Dan Karzarian, the 12% Jew, or just idiots like Jake Shields. They were idiots. These were grifters, these were scammers, these were social liberals basically, and leftists, and if not Zionists for some of them. And all of a sudden, October 7th happens, and they all wake up to the Jewish question and the Israel issue, and now they're at the forefront of the conversation about Israel. Meanwhile, Nicholas J. Fuentes, who's been doing this for 10 years, is maintaining the true, authentic America First, anti-Zionist, anti-communist line, and he's being lambasted. He's being decried as some sort of grifter or some sort of an op. It's insane. People like Stu Peters, for example. Stu Peters was essentially MAGA. He was essentially just a MAGA guy that was kind of edgier than your average MAGA person. He was Alex Jones if Alex Jones was a bit more open to racialism, a bit more open to some of the more politically incorrect rhetoric of the outer echelons, the outer extremities of the dissident right wing. That's all he was. And now he's like a neo-Nazi. Now he's a literal neo-Nazi after he lost cachet in the, we'll say, uh, mainstream conservative adjacent spheres of the conversation. So again, to put a bow on the conversation, the DNC, and then we'll shift over to the RNC, the DNC is adapting. The DNC is no longer playing the greatest hits necessarily of wokeism that this and the sort of snowflake crying about white privilege and black marginalized people, POCs, all these sorts of things. That's still very much in there, but now they're asserting things like now they're asserting things. They're challenging the Americanism of the right. Okay, well, you're not American because you guys support Israel, and that's not American. That's not America first. You have Elon Musk, who's an immigrant, and he wants to flood the country with Indian low skilled labor, or at the very least high skilled labor, and replace like we'll say high skilled, relatively speaking, Indian labor in the tech sphere, and replace otherwise positions that were otherwise, or rather that would otherwise be available to American born citizens. They're using the nativism card against us. And I said this, and many others said this as well too. Just look at the DNC convention of 2024. They telegraphed their entire plan. In that convention, they were raising up signs that said USA. In that convention, AOC make a Trumpian appealing speech where she talked about the working class and the 1% and global interests, and we must make America great again. She was literally echoing MAGA, but reframing it in a left-wing populist manner. That's the new play of the left. The new play of the left is to continue its march, its long march, and its crusade against Western civilization, its crusade against whites, its crusade against Christianity, its crusade against normal, conventional parameters of conservative life or traditional life, all the while appealing to populism. And this is a complete echoing of my very last update video. Populism is cancer. That is what they're doing. They're weaponizing populism effectively, and they're wielding it for the radical left wing interests. Let's shift over to the RNC. Well, the RNC, uh, we'll say by and large, is kind of fucked. Part of my language is kind of screwed. The RNC has lost cachet. We are looking at the polling now. The polling in Trump with the polling for Trump and the approval ratings for Trump rather is in the toilet. It's abysmal. The polling for the Iran war, the complete consensus of the Iran war is overwhelmingly negative, particularly amongst young voters. Um, there is a bipartisan fatigue of the GOP, of the establishment Republican Party. And what is the Republican Party doing in the wake of all this? Well, some of it, most of it's pretty predictable, and some of it's kind of interesting, and it's worth noting. So the most predictable stuff, obviously, is the usual actors, the usual suspects, the Mark Levins, the Laurel Loomers, the Ben Shapiros of the world, and all that entails of that particular Zionist, hyper Zionist milieu. They are hunkering down. they're going for broke. They don't care that the polling is against them. They don't care that the country hates them. They don't care that the Iran war, this Iran war, I don't know really what to call this anymore. It's like an on and off war. It's a complete debacle. This Iran thing is a complete failure. They don't care. They haven't. They again, to reference this phrase again, it is of no consequence to them. They're doubling down in the idea that if you oppose Israel, if you oppose Zionism, and if you are critical of Jewry, you are a woke rightist, neo-Nazi, Islamicist, caliphate having, insurgent to American interests. You're not America first if you don't support Israel. You're not America first if you criticize Jewry. You're not America first if you don't want to advocate for a national and domestic order that puts Christ at the center of our country. You're not America first. You're an anti-Semitic loser, an anti-Semitic insurgent to the American interest. So that's what's happening with that faction, which is a pretty loud faction. I'd say that's like the one of the, if not the primary guiding factions of this administration. But then there's another faction that exists in parallel, almost in competition. Actually, I would say very much in competition with this other faction, and that would be the faction of JD Vance, and that would be the faction of Tucker Carlson, and that would be the faction of Joe Kent and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and the National Conservative Network, the Curtis Yarvin of the world, these individuals. And what these individuals are doing is they're doing a version of what the left is doing, actually. They're trying to adapt to the new landscape. Their adaptation now is they're going to imbibe the populism. They're going to imbibe the populism, some of the nativism, some of it, not all of it, but imbibe the populism, criticize Israel, but not condemn Israel. So with the left is like fuck Israel, we hate Israel. This other side, it ranges, of course. There's a gradients therein. You have people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens who are more fervently anti-Israel. Then you have people like JD Vance who are neutral. Then you have people like Curtis Yarvin who are pro-Israel. Then you have people like Joe Kent who is critical but pro. Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson are pretty much one to one on this. Elon Musk, same thing as well with him. And really, all of them are like this because all these people, all these individuals, have never, none of them have ever denounced Israel as an illegitimate state or a rogue state. Basically, what their argument is that Israel is unruly. It's unruly. It's breaking international precedents. It's breaking international law. It's involving itself in America. It's manipulating America against the American interests, and therefore it should be brought to heel. So what they're basically saying is Israel's fine if it just wasn't doing these things to us. Like if it wasn't doing these immediate things to us as if this exists in a vacuum, then Israel would be just fine and we'd be cool. And also, more importantly, this is another distinction that they make, none of this has anything to do with Jewry in of itself. They'll admit that Jews have a lot to do with this. They'll admit that they'll admit that Jews, by and large, on average, support these sorts of things. But they're saying, well, that's just sort of like the same issue with black people. Well, most black people, by and large, engage in violence, but it doesn't mean that there's something intrinsic about that behavior. It just happens to be the case for whatever reason, education or lack thereof, or indoctrination, intergenerational indoctrination, constantly shifting the goalposts away from a conversation about the identitarian nature of the state of Israel and Jewry and Zionism. Now, this faction, again, it's very multi-layered because again, you have to understand that while JD Vance is tight with Elon Musk and apparently what's her name? Candace Owens, I'm sorry, and even with Curtis Yarvin and that whole crowd and Douglas Wilson, or Doug Wilson rather, even though they're all wrapped up into sort of one broader cadre, they do have sort of separate, distinct iterations of the same conversation. So I mean, like Doug Wilson might be more hawkish against the radical left. Someone like Curtis Yarvin will be hawkish against the radical left. But you have someone like Tucker Carlson who's leaning into it. But then you have JD Vance who is still hawkish against the radical left, right? And so you have all these different sort of actors and players trying to 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 repurpose and reform this new version of essentially MAGA. And this new version they're trying to repurpose basically is a Israel critical, populistic, left wing friendly to some degree or another, left wing friendly, or at least moderated That's a better term as well too. Left-wing friendly to moderated version of like this post-Trumpian nativism. So it's like a little further than Trump because Trump, has never come out against Israel, but it still wants to maintain the populism, the multiracialism, the color blindness of it all. And this tracks directly to the core of the right wing on the institutional level, whether it be the overt Zionist types like Laura Loomer and Ben Shapiro, or this other faction that it consists of the Curtis Yarvin, the PayPal mafia, Elon Musk sort of actors, JD Vance included, of course. Even though these factions, and they are in competition because they do have relatively distinct goals, where the hyper Zionists want just Zionism. They want Zionism uber alles. They want Jewish supremacy and chauvinism outright on display, guiding this country. There's other factions like, oh, wait a minute, we can't do that. Wait a minute, we can't do that because no one wants that. You're pissing off the electorate. And we're not saying destroy Israel, but we're going to have to reform the conversation. So these two factions are at odds with each other. But even though they're at odds with each other, they have a core familial connection. They're both philo-Semitic. Both of these factions are inherently philo-Semitic. Curtis Yarvin, Jewish. Tucker Carlson routinely glazes and gives acolytes to Max Blumenthal, left-wing Jew. Tucker Carlson routinely says, even though I'm critical of Israel, I love Israel. I travel there all the time. Joe Kent literally said when he resigned from the administration to blow the whistle on all the Zionism that he was aware of and that he had to deal with and all these sort of like tell-all. He said even in his tell-all, I support the state of Israel. I am not against the state of Israel. J.D. Vance, same thing, supports the state of Israel. Candace Owens, I think, is probably the closest you can get to someone in that broader network that is kind of like against Israel in of itself. But even she will make distinctions between the state of Israel currently and world Jewry or collectivized Jewry. Because she always likes to bolster up her token friend, Dave Smith, who I like, by the way. I think Dave Smith is a straight shooter, but he is routinely used by these people as a scapegoat for tokenism and a way to admonish themselves or to avoid rather any like legitimate criticisms of being anti-Semitic. And that is the right wing. That is the right wing right now. The right wing essentially is hyper Zionists on one side, clamoring for the complete totalitarian supremacy of Jewry, and on the other side, this new burgeoning pseudo populist, crypto Jewish, cryptophile Semitic, if you will, yet rhetorically Israel critical, moderated, multiracial, multi demographic, populistic right wing, and that is what the GOP has become. Now the problem with that, if you compare that to the left, is that is schizophrenic, ideologically absurd, and it's not sustainable. The left is sustainable. There's a lot of people on the nominal right. They're like, oh, the left can't do this forever. They can't keep this going for. Yes, they can. They've been doing it for multiple decades because the left knows what it's about and it believes what it's about. The right has no fucking idea what it stands for. Is it Christian? Well, we don't know. Is it Israel critical? Sort of, kind of, maybe not sure. Is it counter Judeo? Oh, I don't want to go too far because that's racist. Is it pro white? Is there a white identitarianism to the idea of the preservation of American identity and Americanism in general? Oh, we can't say that. We can't say race and culture. Yeah, they're linked, but they're not inextricably linked, and there's a deeper, nuanced conversation and color of the content of the character, not the color of the skin, referencing, rehashed, vague appeals to left wing radical civil rights leaders. The right wing has no mooring. The right wing has no base. And so the right wing, as it splits itself in two in these relatively distinct yet connected factions, it will cannibalize itself. The Republican Party is cannibalizing itself. And furthermore, both of these factions hate the authentic America First vision, which is pro white explicitly, counter Judeo explicitly, counter Islam, counter radical left, counter left in general, counter communism, anti left, pro American, pro white Christian America First nationalism, nationalism with an interest in intergenerational imperium, a interest in intergenerational, regional, and yes, world influence and world cachet. That is not allowed in any of the factions that are being propped up in the GOP. And what's going to happen, quite frankly, it's already happening right now. The GOP, the and or the RNC will and continue to collapse on itself. Trump has no cachet anymore. J.D. Vance is losing credibility because of his fumbling in interviews, his flip flopping on the issue of Israel and the war, his inability to try to both be in the good graces of Trump, but also differentiate himself from Trump. Then you have Tucker Carlson. Everyone looks at him as what he is, a Fed. Now he's going out there trying to simp for third worldists. Then you have idiots like Dan Bilzerian, Jake Shields, all these other freaks latching onto him. By the way, half these people hate him like 3 or 4 years ago. They fucking hate him. They call him a Fed, whatever. But now, because much to do with the fact that all these actors have detracted from Nicholas J. Fuentes and detracted from the America First, true America First, called the Groyper movement, called America First. It's all those things therein. They've detracted from the actual, authentic, nuanced yet concise and logical and chronological America First movement. Now they're scrambling to cobble together this populism nonsense. And again, this is a complete continuation of the theme and the point of my last update video, that populism is cancer. Populism works for the left because the left requires the scrum to mobilize, because the entire metaphysic of the left is the oppressed. So because the left is compelled by the narrative of the oppressed, it necessarily follows that their prime target is the population, is the lower classes, is the undesirables, is the scrum, the peasants. Populism is their natural strategy. The right doesn't have that luxury, because the right, properly understood, traditionally understood, specifically because, again, the left operates from its ideas of leftism in the European sense. Yeah, there's an Americanized tinge to it with regards to modern day identity politics, but by and large, it gets its ideas from the European tradition of leftism. That's why it's salient, that's why it makes sense. The right has completely abandoned its intergenerational European roots as being of the right. And now it's become, and this has much to do with the founding of this country, liberalism. It is fettered liberalism trying to figure out how far right or left it can go while still maintaining a liberal framework. This is why the American right is failing, and this is why it will continue to fail as it currently is. And the Republican Party is a product of this conundrum, of this paradox. And so, again, the right wing is trying to adopt liberalism. Well, you can't adopt liberalism, you can't adopt leftism and populism when you're trying to prove to people that there is hierarchy. One of the biggest talking points of these people, people like Tucker and many people that would associate with Tucker, like Jordan Peterson, for example, they would inevitably talk about how hierarchy is real and you cannot avoid hierarchy, and people groups are real and IQ is real. Okay, if these things are real, then populism cannot be your go-to. You have to operate within a hierarchical framework. That means there are elites, there are people that are competent, more competent than others. There is a socio-political hierarchy. There is a sociological hierarchy. And yes, that hierarchy does play itself out with gender, and yes, with race, and of course, with culture and theology. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be the death of the RNC. So as we move to the closing of this update video, I kind of want to talk about what to expect, or rather, we actually covered that already. So I want to talk about like the solutions. The solutions are relatively simple. The current Republican Party must be mired. It must be destroyed. And let me be very particular when I say this. I'm not saying every Republican, I'm not saying the Republican voters, I'm saying the people that run the party must be discredited. All of them. All of those who serve Zionism over Americanism or over America, all those who would like to dismiss Christianity, all those who are trying to blur the lines between leftism, populism, and conservatism and libertarianism, and all those who are trying to put capitalism as our God now, as opposed to Jesus Christ, the actual living God, and then also trying to erase the conversation of race, of heritage, of this being a European civilization. I hear this all the time too from people. Oh, saying you're brown. How can you be pro-white? Number one, I'm part white. Number two, it's a white country. So fuck off. like you live in a white country. And again, we need to Stop being caught up by these these ridiculous attempts at gotchas by the left and by the populistic, moderated, in many ways Zionist right wing. Well, you can't be pro-white because this country, it's a white country. Shut up. Everyone that's promulgating that nonsense must be utterly destroyed politically, must be mired, must be completely discredited. And there are multiple ways to do that. One popular way that people have been, people have heard that I support. I don't think it's for everybody. If you have no viable candidates in your area on the right, vote Democrat. Send a message. Vote Democrat to send a message. Not because you are a Democrat, not because you love the left, whatever. Vote Democrat to send a message to the GOP and the RNC that they utterly fucked up and they lost your vote, and you want them to be punished in the midterms and weakened in the midterms so that when the generals come through, they have no credibility. And the only people that can take their place on the right are true, authentic America Firsters. Other options are don't vote at all. Hey, I get it. You don't want to vote? I don't want to vote left. I get it. I totally understand that. Don't vote at all if you have no good options. Or if you have good options like James Fishback, vote. Vote for America First candidates, vanguards like James Fishback. If you're lucky enough to have someone like that, a Thomas Massey-esque figure, even though he lost miserably, that's a we'll cover that probably in a space. We actually have covered that in an X space. You guys got to check out my X spaces. Seriously, so much stuff that we talk about is really kind of gone into in those spaces. But anyway, I digress. Vote for an America First vanguard. Vote for someone that will actually fight for your interests. Stop voting for the same bullshit every single day. Stop voting for it. We need something new and different, and prepare yourselves for the vengeance of the radical left. The radical left is not your friend. They never have been your friend. They never have been your friends, and they never will be your friends. We have to make sure that as it pertains to 2028, we bring in, and I mean this, Fuentes talks about one particular presidential candidate. I'm going to expand that personally, my personal take. People should be developing these slates locally. Develop slates, find people in your area that are America First, that are truly America First for the generals. Try to cultivate that. At the very least, cultivate a network of truly America First people. Yes, get involved with the GOP. Yes, network. Be professional. Don't be a spurg. Don't be one of these guys out here just. Don't be Dan Bilzerian 2.0. Don't be out here trying to be a crazy neo-Nazi freak. Prepare yourself for the vengeance of the radical left, because the radical left does mean business and they are looking to kill. So the solution: admonish the establishment right wing, discredit them in the midterms, vote for candidates that are not them, and prepare local slates that actually embody the America First movement. And as it pertains to the left, reject them. You will never talk to them. They will never be your friends. They will never, ever be America First. They hate you and they want you fucking dead. They want you and I both dead.